Welcome to Life Stories. In today's story, we follow the journey of a woman who, after 50 years of marriage, finds herself standing at the crossroads of a life she never imagined. Betrayed by the man she loved and her own son, she makes a brave decision to walk away and rediscover herself. This is a story of resilience, self-discovery, and the power of embracing freedom after a lifetime of sacrifice. Stay with us as we dive into this emotional and empowering tale. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to begin today's story. For 50 years, Robert Johnson and I never had the wedding I dreamed of. In the early days of our marriage, Robert said we didn't have the money, that as long as we were together, the wedding didn't matter. I believed him, just like I believed everything he said. The years passed, and he changed his excuse. Now, he said that we had been married for so long that it would be meaningless to have a wedding after all these years. He would smile, as though he was comforting me with his words, and I would accept them with a soft sigh, pretending I was fine. We lived our lives in a steady rhythm, our days passing in the mundane tasks of raising our son, David, and maintaining our home. I worked tirelessly to make sure everything ran smoothly. From the day we moved into that cramped apartment, barely enough space for the two of us, to the day we moved into our house with a garden, I was the one who kept everything together. I poured my heart and soul into our life, into our family, and into Robert. I thought, perhaps naively, that love could be enough to sustain us. And then, on our 50th wedding anniversary, everything came crashing down. Robert came to me one evening, his face strangely bright, his eyes full of something I couldn't quite place. He said he had planned something special for our anniversary, a grand celebration. A wedding, something to mark the milestone of our life together. I should have been overjoyed, but as the words left his mouth, I felt an unsettling discomfort creeping into my chest. Something wasn't right. And so, the day came. The wedding was grand indeed. But it wasn't for me. Robert stood at the altar in his finest suit, a smile of contentment on his face, holding the hand of another woman. Claire, a woman I had known only vaguely as a distant acquaintance, stood beside him, her radiant smile catching the sunlight, her eyes sparkling with a kind of joy that should have belonged to me. The crowd cheered. Among them, I saw David, my own son, clapping enthusiastically, his face full of pride and happiness as though it was the best day of his life. I stood there, frozen in place, my heart heavy, my breath caught in my throat. For 50 years, I had been by Robert's side, building a life, raising a family, giving him everything I had. And now, here he was, sharing his vows with Claire, the woman who had always been there, waiting for her chance. It seemed, the realization hit me like a cold wave. I had been his second choice, a woman he settled for after losing the one he truly wanted. And now, as she stood beside him, I saw all the years of my devotion crumble to dust. I was not the only one left in shock. I caught a glimpse of the people around me, our friends, our family, all gathered together to celebrate Robert and Claire's union. The whispers began, the glances exchanged. No one seemed to notice me, standing in the back, alone, trying to hold myself together. Not even David. He was too caught up in the fantasy of the moment, too eager to embrace the idea that his father had finally found happiness. But it wasn't with me. It never had been. As I stood there, watching them, something inside me began to shift. The years of patience, of sacrifice, of love that had gone unreturned, all came rushing to the surface. I thought back to everything I had endured, the sleepless nights with a newborn, the quiet moments of loneliness when Robert came home late, the unspoken words that hung between us like an insurmountable distance. And now, here he was, standing in front of the whole town, proclaiming his love for someone else, someone who had never been there through the struggle, through the sacrifice. I left that day, not with a sense of closure, but with the overwhelming weight of years lost, of love unreciprocated. Robert came home that night still wearing his suit, his collar stained with the faintest trace of lipstick. It wasn't mine. I knew that for sure. My son, David, followed him inside, both of them too unaware of the storm brewing inside me. I sat there, waiting, my thoughts swirling, when David flipped the switch to the light, casting a harsh glow over the room. "Mom, what are you doing here?" he asked, his voice full of confusion. I couldn't believe he was asking me that. I had lived in that house for over 40 years. But now, my own son couldn't understand why I was there. His words stung more than I could bear. I let out a cold laugh. "Where were you today?" I asked, my voice steady, but with the ice-cold anger I had never allowed myself to feel before. David looked at me as though I had lost my mind. "Mom, why are you acting like this? It's just a wedding. It doesn't matter. We were just running errands." But it did matter. It mattered more than anything. I had spent 50 years with Robert. But for all that time, I had never been enough. Not to him, and not to David. They had both chosen Claire over me. And in that moment, I knew I couldn't be silent any longer. I stood up, my hands shaking with a mix of rage and sorrow, and pulled out the divorce papers I had prepared in secret. I placed them on the table. My eyes locked on Robert's. "Let's get a divorce," I said, my voice firm. Robert looked at me, his face a mixture of anger and disbelief. "Rebecca, enough with the tantrum. We're in our 70s. Why are you acting like this?" "Exactly," I said, my voice even, but full of finality. "We're not young anymore, which is why I can't afford to waste another moment on you." I turned away from him, ready to walk away from the life I had known for 50 years. The next morning, I stood at the door with my suitcase in hand. The house I had spent over 40 years in felt foreign, as though it had never truly been mine. For the first time in so long, I felt the lightness of freedom, the sense that I was walking away from a life that had never served me. David was already up, but his eyes didn't soften when he saw me, suitcase in hand. Instead, his face twisted into an expression of frustration. "Mom, you're being ridiculous," he said, his voice thick with impatience. "You and Dad have been together forever. How can you just divorce him like this? Who's going to cook? Who's going to clean? Who's going to take care of Jacob?" His words hit me harder than I expected. It wasn't just the anger in his voice, but the utter lack of understanding. He hadn't even thought to offer a kind word, or a helping hand. He was only concerned with the things I had always done for him, the roles I had always played in his life. In that moment, I saw him for what he truly was, a selfish, entitled man who had taken me for granted all these years. I had given him everything, and he couldn't even give me the respect I deserved. "Why don't you just stop?" I snapped, my voice laced with bitterness. "I'm not your maid, David. I'm your mother. I don't owe you anything." His face froze, his mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. I felt a brief pang of guilt, but it was quickly replaced by the overwhelming realization that my son had never truly seen me. Not as a woman, not as a person with her own needs and desires, but only as the woman who was there to serve him, to keep everything running smoothly. And now, when I finally stood up for myself, he couldn't understand why. David's wife, Sophia, stepped forward then, her hand on his arm, as though trying to calm him down. But her eyes told a different story. She was uncomfortable with the tension, unsure of how to handle it. She tugged at David's arm, trying to get him to see reason. "David, that's enough," she said softly. Mom's made her decision. But David wasn't hearing it. His frustration boiled over, and before I could stop him, he stormed off with his family, his eyes flashing with anger. As he disappeared into the distance, I felt an overwhelming sadness wash over me. My son, the boy I had carried for 9 months, the child I had nearly died for, had turned into someone I didn't even recognize. I had given him everything, and he had nothing left to give me. I turned back to Robert, who had been standing silently in the background, watching the whole scene unfold. He didn't speak a word, his face etched with a mixture of guilt and indifference. He had never cared about me the way he cared for Claire. I had spent years believing that his silence, his lack of affection, was just a phase, something that would eventually pass. But it hadn't. It never would. "I've packed my things," I said to him, my voice cold, my resolve hardening. "I'm leaving. I don't need you anymore." Robert stared at me, his expression unreadable. There was a long pause. And for a fleeting moment, I thought he might say something. Anything. That would make me change my mind. But he didn't. He just stood there, his eyes avoiding mine. Finally, he spoke, his voice soft, almost apologetic. "Rebecca, we're old now. Can't you just let it go?" he asked. His voice tinged with frustration. But it was too late. For the first time in my life, I didn't need him. I didn't need anyone. I had spent my whole life trying to please others, trying to make everyone happy. But now, it was my turn. I wasn't going to let him or anyone else dictate how I lived my life. "I can't," I said firmly, picking up my suitcase and walking toward the door. "We've been together for 50 years. But that's enough. I'm done." And with that, I left. The weight that had been pressing on me for so long lifted as I stepped outside. For the first time in decades, I felt free. I left Robert and David behind without looking back, my heart heavy but resolute. For the first time in years, I was free to live for myself. The apartment I had kept in my name, my own little sanctuary, was waiting for me. I closed the door behind me, the quiet of the place settling around me like a warm embrace. It was mine, and only mine. No one else's expectations. No more feeling invisible or unappreciated. I could breathe. The next few days were filled with a strange kind of peace. The chaos of my old life, the years of neglect and hurt, seemed far away, as though it belonged to someone else. My friends, the ones who had always been by my side, rallied around me. They understood. They had seen the cracks in my marriage long before I had. They were not surprised by my decision. And yet, they marveled at how much lighter I seemed. They knew how hard I had worked to hold everything together, only to be cast aside when Robert found someone else. "Rebecca," one of them, Carol, said as we sat in a quiet cafe, sipping coffee, "you've been living for everyone else for so long. Now it's your time. Don't look back. You deserve more than what they gave you." Her words resonated with me in a way I had never expected. More than just the sympathy. It was the truth I had spent so long denying. I had been giving, always giving, never asking for anything in return. I had poured my love into a man who never truly appreciated it. And then I had poured it into a son who didn't see me as anything more than a caretaker. But no more. I made a promise to myself in those quiet moments. I was going to live for me now. I had dreams. Dreams that had been buried under the weight of everyone else's needs. And now, for the first time, I could pursue them. The phone calls from David didn't stop. He texted relentlessly, trying to convince me to come back, to make amends with Robert. He told me I was making a huge mistake, that one day I would regret it. But his words no longer had power over me. His concern was not for me, but for the life he had lost, his free pass to use me, to depend on me without ever offering anything in return. I blocked his number after the 5th message in one day, feeling a strange mix of relief and sadness. I had spent so many years living for him, for Robert, but now, the only person I had to live for was me. It wasn't long before I decided to take a trip, something I had always wanted to do but had never allowed myself. The thought of traveling, seeing the world with no one else's preferences to consider, filled me with excitement. I booked a group tour to Europe. Something spontaneous, something I would never have done if I had stayed married to Robert. The trip was everything I hoped for. The freedom to explore new places, to taste new foods, to meet women just like me, women who had spent their lives living for others, only to find themselves alone in their later years. But not bitter, not regretful. They were full of life, full of stories of their own, stories of self-discovery, of realizing that life wasn't about pleasing everyone else. Life was about living for yourself, about making memories that were truly yours. By the end of the trip, I had learned more about myself than I had in the last 50 years. I had laughed, I had cried, And for the first time in my life, I had truly felt free. It was a beautiful kind of happiness. One that wasn't dependent on anyone else. I posted photos of my journey on social media. Not for validation, but because I wanted to remember it. To hold on to those moments of joy and independence. Robert, of course, was still following my account. He liked every post, left comments pretending to be happy for me. But I knew better. His actions spoke louder than his words. He was trying to soothe his own guilt. Trying to act as though he didn't care. I didn't care what he thought anymore. His presence in my life was nothing but a shadow. Something I had already shed. When I returned from my trip, the peace I had found during my travels stayed with me. I was different now, stronger, clearer. I didn't need Robert, or David, or anyone to define who I was. I was enough, just as I was, and nothing could take that away from me. As the months passed, my life continued to transform. The weight I had carried for so long, the burden of a life lived for others, was finally gone. I had learned to live for myself, to embrace the freedom I had denied myself for so many years. Each day was filled with joy, with new experiences, with the promise of endless possibilities. The friendships I had formed during my travels became a foundation of support. The kind of bond I had always longed for but never had. Together, we planned more trips, laughed about the past, and made plans for the future. And as for Robert, David, and Claire, they were no longer my concern. Their lives had spiraled into chaos. And it was not my place to fix it. They had chosen their paths. And now they had to walk them alone. I didn't need to be a part of their mess anymore. Then, one evening, while I was enjoying a quiet dinner with friends, I received a call. It was David, finally apologizing, his voice thick with regret. "Mom, I'm sorry for everything," he said, his words filled with a sincerity I hadn't heard before. But in that moment, I realized that I had already moved on. My heart no longer longed for their approval. And I wasn't looking for their forgiveness anymore. I had forgiven myself. "I'm happy," I told him simply, "and I don't need anything from you or your father." And with that, I hung up, feeling lighter than I ever had before. Life had given me another chance. And this time, I wasn't going to waste a single moment. Thank you for watching my life story. If you'd like to hear more, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more life stories.